Welcome back to the Midnight Burn. This is part 2 of a 2-part video about the disappearance of Rebecca Paulk and how the corruption ran straight to Meridian, Mississippi, where she was last seen alive. Part 1 is in my profile. This video is going to shock you, to say the least. I tell you how a sheriff gives an inmate literally anything he desires, including the keys to his truck. How he was given day and night passes away from the jail, and so much more. We're going to see how all this ties into the disappearance of Rebecca Paulk in Meridian, Mississippi. I'm your host, and tonight we're peeling back another layer of corruption so shocking and disturbing it was hid from the mainstream news. When we last spoke, I left you hanging on the edge of Sheriff Tyrone Clark's introduction to our twisted tale. Get your popcorn ready. Let's dive in. Picture this, July 25th, 2016. The Alabama Supreme Court chamber in Montgomery. 9 Supreme Court justices staring down at the most corrupt sheriff I've ever heard of, finally telling him to turn in that badge he swore to uphold. But Sheriff Tyrone Clark wasn't working alone. He had accomplices dancing to his tune like marionettes on strings of corruption. But his accomplice wasn't a chief deputy. No, it was an inmate by the name of Rodney Coates. An inmate. Remember the name Rodney Coates from the last video? Apparently Rodney Coates and the man who was seen on camera in Meridian, Mississippi driving Rebecca Paulk's car were pretty close friends. But there's more. Rodney Coates had a $675,000 bond hanging over his head. Trafficking cocaine, trafficking methamphetamine, assault in the first degree. This man's rap sheet read like a criminal's greatest hits album. Yet somehow, someway, Sheriff Tyrone Clark handed him the keys to the kingdom, handed him his personal sheriff's truck keys to traffic drugs in and out of the jail. One of the places he would frequent was Meridian, Mississippi. This time the trafficking was women. Witness after witness took that stand, their voices trembling like autumn leaves in a hurricane wind. They painted a picture of a jail where the inmates ran the asylum, where Rodney Coates walked in and out at free will, acting like he owned the place. Backpack in tow, never searched, never even questioned. If Rodney Coates said I said something, then don't question him. Those were Sheriff Tyrone Clark's words echoing through his department meeting. Could you imagine? A sheriff giving an inmate power over his own deputies, making them dance to a criminal's commands? But the darkness runs deeper than Mississippi mud after a summer storm. Officer Brian Harris from another nearby police department was dispatched to answer a welfare call check at one of Rodney Coates' houses. Yeah, inmate Rodney Coates had multiple drug houses he would drive police vehicles to at free will. But that welfare check visit would crack this case wide open. What officer found at one of Coates' residences would make your blood run cold? Drugs. Guns with serial numbers filed off like fingerprints scraped from the dead. He also surveillance cameras watching each house every move. What else he found is multiple rooms locked with multiple women inside. Cameras recording their every move. Trapped. All of this footage ran straight to Sheriff Tyrone Clark's personal laptop. One of the victims was a woman from Meridian, Mississippi, the same town Rebecca Paulk was last seen alive in with Johnny Poiso, a close friend to Rodney Coates. One of the women testified she was traded to men like cattle for a drug debt. Forced to clean. Forced to cook. These women were forced to work for inmate Rodney Coates and his band of devils. One of the Meridian, Mississippi women testified through tears that could fill the Tombigbee River. She told how she was forced to smuggle drugs into that jail. She also told how she was violated by multiple officers, including the sheriff who should have protected her. Inside Clark's jail, they found condoms. Inside a place meant for punishment and rehabilitation, they were running a trafficking headquarters, a brothel, and a drug smuggling business. And at Rodney Coates' stash houses, they was running a human trafficking operation. The FBI took DNA samples from Sheriff Clark's office in the courthouse. Imagine that scene, federal agents swabbing for evidence of sex in the sheriff's own sanctuary. But here's where our story takes a turn darker than a moonless night on the Delta. Another woman testified that she was pregnant with inmate Rodney Coates's child. She stated she was smuggling drugs in a hollow heel part of her shoe, like some backwoods twisted Cinderella story. She said this would happen as often as every other day that she was allowed to be out of her locked room. Every other day, she and inmate Rodney Coates engaged in relations inside that jail. Inside the courthouse, everywhere a camera wasn't present. University of West Alabama police officer Leslie Hines took action. A nearby police chief contacted Officer Hines. An investigation which included the 17th Judicial Task Force concluded, and they devised a plan to extract those women who were being held against their will. One by one, they busted down doors and gave these women freedom. But the tentacles of this corruption spread wider and wider. There was reports of women screaming, and lots of traffic at the house of Johnny Poiso. Those reports went uninvestigated thoroughly until the raid of his friend Rodney Coates' stash houses. Johnny Poiso, you remember, was last seen with Rebecca Paulk in Meridian the day she went missing. You see the picture now? A search of Johnny Poiso's residence came up dry. Were they too late? Did Johnny get word of Rodney Coates' demise and clean up? An extremely unusual amount of security cameras were found all throughout Johnny Poiso's property, including his barn. You'll see why this is so strange in just a minute. When the FBI raided the sheriff's department, they found Rodney Coates with deputy uniforms in his gym bag and carrying weapons at his fingertips. You heard me correctly. I said the sheriff's department got raided by the federal police. Inmate Rodney Coates had keys to gun safes, evidence rooms, and multiple police vehicles, like he was the sheriff himself. His so-called surveillance room within the sheriff's department was called Coates Quarters. He also had another surveillance room in one of the administration buildings. It was complete with television monitors and tech equipment. Bus seats from Sheriff Tyrone Clark's old campaign buses was lined right in front of those monitors. They also recovered a laptop labeled Sheriff that he used to monitor his drug empire and human traffic ring from behind bars. Was Rodney Coates monitoring Johnny Poiso's residence as well? Now, as we stand at the crossroads of corruption and conspiracy, we must ask ourselves, could there be more connections we haven't uncovered? Could this web of deceit stretch beyond what we know? Rebecca Paulk, the woman who vanished like morning mist, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. Johnny Poiso was seen driving her car with her inside. Johnny Poiso, good friend to Rodney Coates. Coates, the puppet master pulling strings from his jail cell kingdom. Was Rebecca in one of those house-trapped at one point in time? Rodney Coates would make the drive to Meridian, Mississippi quite often to see Johnny Poiso. Did one of those trips include the day Johnny Poiso was seen driving Rebecca's car? Is it coincidence that these names dance together in Alabama and Mississippi shadows? Could the same corruption that turned a jail into a criminal enterprise have darker tentacles reaching into unsolved disappearances? When men like Clark, Coates, and their associates operate above the law, when they treat human beings like commodities to be traded and used, what other horrors might they have hidden in Alabama's and Mississippi's dark corners? The Alabama Supreme Court found Clark guilty beyond reasonable doubt. They stripped him of his badge and his power, his kingdom built on human suffering. You'd expect his sentence to be quite large, but he only got 6 months in probation. 6 months for years of corruption that destroyed lives and shattered trust. But justice for Tyrone Clark doesn't answer all our questions. It doesn't tell us what happened to Rebecca Paulk. It doesn't explain every shadow cast by this web of corruption that stretched from jail cells to the streets, from Sumter County to Meridian, Mississippi, and to places we may never know. Some dice once thrown never stop rolling. Some secrets once buried claw their way back to the surface like the restless dead. And some stories demand to be told, no matter how dark the night gets. The truth always has a way of surfacing. It can't stay hidden forever. Tonight we've exposed another layer of corruption that ran through Alabama and Mississippi like poison through veins. But questions remain, shadows linger, and somewhere in the darkness, answers wait to be discovered. Keep your eyes open, Mississippi. Keep asking questions. Keep demanding truth. Until next time, This is the Midnight Burn, reminding you. Catch the dice. They rollin'.